Beginning with the first Star Wars film in 1977 and spanning 9 full-length motion pictures, the Skywalker Saga is over 40 years old. Between A New Hope and The Rise of Skywalker, there are still plenty of questions left unanswered. Fair warning, major spoilers for The Rise of Skywalker and The Mandalorian lie ahead. In the first entry in the most recent trilogy, The Force Awakens, we learn the diminutive Maz Kanata somehow has Luke's first lightsaber, the one Obi-Wan Kenobi gives him in A New Hope and that originally belonged to his father Anakin. Han asks Maz how she got it, and she answers only,
"A good question. For another time."
Well, whatever another time means, it's outside the Skywalker Saga. The Rise of Skywalker ends with Luke's first lightsaber alongside Leia's, buried near Luke's old home on Tatooine. It's a question not easily answered. Luke loses his first lightsaber when Darth Vader chops off his hand during their climactic duel at the end of The Empire Strikes Back in Cloud City above the planet Bespin. Luke's hand and his weapon fall down the same long shaft Luke drops down himself. The planet Maz's tavern is on is Takodana, in a completely different system from Bespin. It isn't unthinkable the saber could find its way to Maz's hands. Presumably someone found it and eventually sold it to her. Maybe she found it herself, or maybe she acquired it through less than legal means. Whatever path it took, we may never know. We can't really count The Mandalorian as part of the Skywalker Saga, but the emergence of the child, better known as Baby Yoda, is for now linked to the tiny Jedi Master Yoda, who appears both in person and through just his voice in most of the Skywalker Saga films. Fan theories sprang up almost immediately upon Baby Yoda's appearance at the end of The Mandalorian's first episode, with many guessing the toddler is either a clone of or directly related to Master Yoda. On one hand, it's kind of silly to assume the child has anything at all to do with Yoda other than being members of the same species. After all, if you're introduced to a human character in a Star Wars film, you don't immediately assume, oh, that must be Han Solo's nephew.
Come on, let's keep a little optimism here.
On the other hand, the assumption is understandable since we know so very little about Yoda and the child's species. We don't even know their species' name yet, which George Lucas purposely left out of the mythology. If there's a deeper link between the two, we'll likely have to wait until further episodes of The Mandalorian to learn it, since the hero himself is now searching for the child's planet. The Skywalker Saga offers no answers, for now. One of the biggest surprises in the Star Wars prequels was the discovery that it was the young Anakin Skywalker who created C-3PO. The protocol droid's best friend, R2-D2, appears in all 3 prequels as well. Yet when Obi-Wan is reunited with them in A New Hope, he doesn't seem to recognize them, and we never learn why.
Hello there.
Of course, the real reason is most likely because The Phantom Menace came out over 20 years after the first Star Wars film, and George Lucas had no idea in 1977 the droids would appear in any prequels. But there are some possible narrative explanations, too. It could be that Kenobi does remember the droids, but is keeping that to himself.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
After all, he clearly doesn't want to tell Luke about his father, and explaining his acquaintance to the droids brings him closer to that difficult truth. It's also possible he genuinely doesn't remember them. Kenobi isn't depicted in the earlier films as being particularly attached to droids. A story in the Clone Wars shows Kenobi is not nearly as concerned as Anakin when R2-D2 is presumed lost.
Anakin, it's only a droid. You know attachment is not acceptable for a Jedi.
Anakin only convinces his master to let him rescue the droid by telling him there's sensitive military data in its memory. When Finn, Rey, and the other heroes believe they're sinking to their deaths in The Rise of Skywalker, Finn tries to tell Rey something, but he never gets the chance. Thankfully, the heroes survive, and when Rey asks Finn what he was going to tell her, he says he'll tell her later. Poe teases Finn about it, but by the end of the film, we still haven't learned whatever it was Finn meant to say. The most obvious assumption is that he was going to profess his love for her. The two obviously care for one another, and shortly after they meet in The Force Awakens, Finn asks her pointedly if she has a boyfriend.
Got a boyfriend? Cute boyfriend?
None of your business, that's why.
According to a Cinema Blend report quoting Rise of Skywalker director and co-writer J.J. Abrams, however, Finn's motivations may have been decidedly less romantic. Rather than making a play for Rey, he was apparently going to confirm something suggested repeatedly throughout the sequel trilogy, namely that he's Force-sensitive. There are 2 big hints in The Rise of Skywalker that Finn might have enough of a connection with the Force to be trained as a Jedi. First, there's when Finn assures fellow Reformed Stormtrooper Janna that it was the Force that made it possible for his true self to emerge from the First Order's conditioning.
The Force brought us together.
Later, in the battle against the Final Order fleet, Finn says he knows the Order has transferred their navigation from the ground tower to the command ship only because he could feel it. When we think back to The Force Awakens, there were hints since the very beginning. Finn makes a memorable impression on Kylo Ren after the village is slaughtered in the movie's opening. Later, when he escapes with Poe, Kylo knows which stormtrooper he was right away.
The one from the village. FN 2187.
Both moments suggest Finn is either causing or being affected by ripples in the Force, which Kylo feels as well. Meanwhile, General Hux and Captain Phasma seem confused since he had shown
no prior signs of nonconformity.
The Rise of Skywalker ends without any firm word either way, but it seems at least possible the man formerly known as FN 2187 might be due a lightsaber of his own. The first time we see a Sith using Force lightning is in Return of the Jedi when Emperor Palpatine nearly kills Luke Skywalker with it. Since then, it's been clear that some Sith can use it while others can't, but it isn't really clear what governs who gets to use it and who doesn't. We never see Darth Vader using Force lightning, but considering how much of his body is mechanical, it's a safe assumption that using it would be dangerous to him. But we also never see Darth Maul use it. Supreme Leader Snoke never uses it as far as we know, though admittedly his death in The Last Jedi doesn't give us much chance to see what he can or can't do. Kylo Ren doesn't appear to be able to summon the stuff, and considering his temper and overall lack of subtlety, we're pretty sure if he could, he would. One might assume that Sith masters like Palpatine purposely refrain from teaching their students how to use Force lightning to make sure they have an advantage should the student try to kill them. But that wouldn't explain how Count Dooku knows how to use it, nor how Rey, without even consciously trying, summons Force lightning in The Rise of Skywalker. Even if you missed all the promotional lead-ups to The Rise of Skywalker mentioning Emperor Palpatine's return, his resurrection is made clear in the beginning of the film. What isn't answered at any point is exactly how the Sith Master survived his supposed death at the end of Return of the Jedi. In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine says he knows how to bring the dead back to life and uses his claim to seduce Anakin Skywalker, who was plagued by premonitions of Padme's death, to the dark side.
He could actually save people from death.
Still, even if we assume Palpatine is telling Anakin the truth, that doesn't explain how the Sith Lord can resurrect himself, particularly when you consider the manner of his death. The dying Vader hurls Palpatine off a catwalk down a long shaft, and the Emperor appears to explode when he reaches the bottom. We're not suggesting Palpatine's resurrection is uniquely unlikely in a narrative so full of making the impossible possible, but The Rise of Skywalker nevertheless fails to explain exactly how he survives not only his drop down that shaft, but the destruction of the second Death Star. At the end of The Rise of Skywalker, Rey uses the strength of all the Jedi before her and reflects Palpatine's power back at him, killing him. But is he really dead? Palpatine's death seems pretty final at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. We see him blown to pieces. But arguably, his death doesn't seem any more or less final at the end of Return of the Jedi. If Palpatine can come back from that, what can't he come back from? Further complicating things is the fact that we're never told exactly how Palpatine survives Return of the Jedi. If we knew that, we might see that somehow the same or similar explanation doesn't apply this time. In the end, it may be best to assume that we don't know whether or not this is really the end for Palpatine, or how many times Palpatine has died, or even which Palpatines have been the real Palpatine. In spite of the fact that he personally trains Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's the one who finds Anakin Skywalker, and he's the first Jedi we see communicating from beyond the grave, Qui-Gon Jinn is never mentioned in the original trilogy, or even in the more recent films of the Skywalker Saga. The only teacher Kenobi mentions is Yoda, and says he took it upon himself to train Anakin, never mentioning that it was Qui-Gon's dying wish.
Promise me you will train the boy.
The real-world reason is probably no more complicated than the fact that George Lucas hadn't yet conceived of Jinn in the original trilogy, but no narrative reason has been offered. One possibility is that, not wanting him to learn the identity of his father, Kenobi and Yoda chose to give Luke as few details as possible. It could also be that Jinn's reputation is spotty. After all, he brings Anakin to the Jedi, and a lot of blood is spilled before Anakin is redeemed. The Rise of Skywalker finally answers the question of Rey's parentage. We learn she's the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, and that her birth parents sold her into servitude on Jakku to save her from the Emperor, after which her parents were murdered by a Jedi hunter. The only missing piece is Rey's grandmother. Emperor Palpatine isn't exactly a stunning paragon of charisma, so it's natural to wonder exactly who agreed to make a union with the Sith Lord. The prequels give us one possibility. Seen often standing next to Palpatine in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith is a quiet, pale, and eerie-looking bald woman named Sly Moore. The official Star Wars website describes her as, quote, Palpatine's senior administrative aide during his chancellorship, and says that rumors surround the enigmatic woman. The expanded universe offers a couple of other options, though they're from stories no longer considered canon. In the 1995 novel Children of the Jedi by Barbara Hambly, Ragonda Ismarin is introduced. The former Jedi youngling is captured by the Empire and made Palpatine's concubine. There's also Isan Izzard, introduced in the Dark Horse comic book series X-Wing Rogue Squadron. At one point, Izzard is the director of Imperial Intelligence and actually takes over leadership of the Empire after Palpatine's death in Return of the Jedi. Her position suggests she likely at one point had a close relationship with the Emperor, though anything romantic is left to speculation. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more Looper videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.